Hello and welcome to PGurus channel. It's my pleasure and honor to have the company of Francois Gautier on our channel one more time. Francois, namaskar and welcome to PGurus channel. Francois, it's been a while since we had you on a hangout with PGurus. Much has happened, Corona has happened, and we are all grappling with this. I think when the last time we spoke, you had just gotten back from France, and you're talking about how you had to wend your way through Delhi and so on and so forth. How are things with you? Where are you these days, Pune or in Pondicherry? Where are you these days?
Well, I just came from Delhi, then Pune, and now I'm in Pondicherry, and probably going back to Pune and Delhi next week. So a lot of travel, much more difficult now, but I feel that I have to continue moving, that I cannot be stopped by the COVID.
Absolutely, and that's how every one of us think. That's the mindset that we all have. Francois, you've been an author, you're a published author, you've had many books in the past, and you also have this museum in Pune, which you've been trying to portray the history of India, plus all the different things that the Mughals did, especially the Aurangzeb's reign, where he has very meticulously maintained all the atrocities he had performed on the Hindus. How is that thing going, Francois?
Yeah, I feel that books are wonderful, and this book that I have written, I have lots of hope in it, and I think it's doing well, but they have a limited shelf life, right? So a museum, I felt, would be something that would outlive me and have a more lasting life than a book or an article. But whatever the power of a book and article, I think they have a power both visible and invisible. But a museum is something which I always felt that will last a long time. The only thing is that it's a very difficult task because first, the first problem is that Indian history is a very touchy subject. I mean, the moment you talk about the Mughals, the moment you talk about Hindu genocide that I have done, or Goa Inquisition, or even the Shakti of Shivaji Maharaj, there are a lot of turmoils. There are a lot of people who are offended or hurt. So difficult task. Secondly, difficult because to raise money, a Frenchman who was building a museum of Indian history, when Mr. Modi was chief minister of Gujarat, he tried to put me in touch with some, wealthy businessman. At that time, he was a very, he was in the center of India and he had a great grasp on a lot of things. So he put me in touch with 2, 3 people, and they received me because it was Mr. Modi. But in the end, they told me, no, we are more comfortable with women empowerment and health and education. This is a very touchy subject. So I never got the kind of money that I was hoping for to do a world-class museum. Instead, people give 5,000, 10,000, 50,000, maximum 1 lakh. So I get some money, I do a small building, I put one exhibition, then I get so I have 16 buildings now and maybe 20 exhibitions. I'm doing a new one on Vijayanagara because it's part of the Hindu genocide and it's the last great Hindu empire that was based on goodness and dharma. And then another one on Tarabai because she was an extraordinary heroine, and one more on the Rani Kito Chenama. And then I have one on the Shakti of Shivaji Maharaj and one on the Vedas. So I keep going on and making new exhibition, but with a shoestring budget, because only the Indian government could give me the type of money I need to make I need about 15 crores, which is not a huge amount. But I met so many of them. I met Mr. Modi after he became Prime Minister. I met Mr. Fatwanis also when he was Chief Minister of Maharashtra, and he had pledged 5 crores. But his bureaucracy sat on them and told me that I was not eligible for that sum. So I never got 1 paisa from it. So it's a very difficult task, but still, I keep going on because I feel it's probably the best thing I have done in my life.
Absolutely, and I could not agree with you more. Francois, the history of Vijayanagara and also of Tarabai, how she had Aurangzeb on the run towards the end of his reign, he could not spend one night in peace. He was always afraid that she would come and ambush him. That's not the way for the great emperor Aurangzeb to die. I mean, he had to pay for a lot of the sins he committed as an emperor. So this is fascinating, Francois. And now I'm stuck in India. I mean, I'm stuck in the United States. I don't know when I'm going to make my next trip. Once I tried to make it to Mumbai, it was raining a lot at that time, so I couldn't plan to come to Pune. This time I'm going to spend a little bit more time, and I'm definitely looking forward to coming and seeing you there. We'll work on that. But the most important thing today, the thing that we're going to talk about, is your new book, An Entirely New History of India. So you have been associated with this museum, so that perhaps was one of the things that spurred you to write this book. But perhaps you can tell our viewers what to expect in this book of yours, Francois.
Right. I came to India by accident or by fate, whatever you call it. I became a journalist also by accident or fate, and my eyes were opened in Kashmir actually, because I had covered Kashmir in the 90s, say from 1990 till 2000, and there I saw what were done to the Hindus of Kashmir for no reason other than their religion. So that opened my eyes, and I started studying Indian history. Aurangzeb, of course, but so many others, Shivaji Maharaj and Maharana Pratap and the Mughals. And then I realized that Indian history has not been written as it happened. So I started writing books. I mean, again, I'm no historian, but I did a lot of research, and so I started writing books. And this book is the most complete, the most revolutionary, I think, not only for me, but in terms of Indian history ever written. Because either you have books which follow the British model, which tended to downgrade India, to have dates which were not correct, to have events which are not properly recorded, or the Marxist history, from Nehru, all these Marxist historians, whether Romila Tapar or Rifan Habib in India, but then you have people like Turchke or Witzel or Jaffaro in France. So the entire history of India is mostly false. It's built on fake icons, fake icons. Mr. Meru propped up, for instance, Ashoka. And if you study Ashoka, I mean, Ashoka is politically correct because he's supposed to have become a Buddhist after seeing the horrors of the Battle of Kalinga. But actually, if you study Indian history, first, Ashoka was a very, very cruel emperor. He was called Chand Ashoka the Cruel, because he massacred a lot of people. And also he converted to Buddhism for political reasons before the Battle of Kalinga, because he wanted to counterbalance the power of the Jains. At the time, the Jains, and there are different sects of the Jains. They had a lot of political power, different emperors were associated with. So to counterbalance them, he became a Buddhist. So the entire history of India is like that. Like Indians didn't master the iron, but if you look back, you see that they actually are a lot of mastery of the iron. That Indians didn't have horses, but they did have horses, although they preferred elephants because elephants had, a more Vedic symbolic significance for them. So from this time of the iron and the horses, then Alexander the Great, who actually is portrayed as a very, very victorious march into India. But actually, if you read it again, everything is there. It's not that I'm inventing everything. He had a lot of problems. He got wounded in India. He encountered fierce resistance. He died from that wound that he had in India. He was very interested in Indian spirituality. He met some sadhus and even brought back one of them to Greece. So, and then you go to Ashoka, and then you go to, the entire history of India needs to be rewritten properly. I'm not saying that you need to glorify India, but both the dark side, Indians have suffered so much from invasions, from Alexander the Great to the Muslim invader. The greatest genocide ever is that of the Hindus. I mean, I have an exhibition in my museum on the Hindu genocide. Even according to the Encyclopedia Britannica, you have the Hindu Kush, 500,000 Hindus taken as slaves, who perished of cold on the Hindu Kush. It's a huge Holocaust, and thereafter it was named Hindu Kush, the massacre of Hindus, to all the Muslim invasion, to Aurangzeb, to Timur, who killed 100,000 Hindus in a day. It is recorded. It is recorded that in one day, Timur in Delhi killed 100,000 Hindus. Can you imagine what it means in those days? There were no machine guns, and you could kill 100,000 people in a few hours, by sword, or it was an incredible butchery, incredible genocide. So the dark side of Indian history has been swept under the carpet, both by the British and by Mr. Nehru, and also the glorious side. We were talking about Tarabai, but there are so many heroines of India. Of course, the Rani of Jhansi is the most well-known, but there are so many of them. I mean, today, India is thought as the land of rape. There have been the BBC and CNN, they have kind of painted such a dark image of India, of a place which is, dangerous and polluted and dangerous Hindu fanatism and dangerous for women. It's absolutely untrue, absolutely untrue. So I'm trying to prop up all these heroines. I have a series of exhibitions on all these heroines. And in my books also, I speak about the Rani of Jhansi, of course, but so many others. Then you have, for instance, what is called the First Independence War of India, which actually was a mutiny to re-establish the Mughal throne. The entire purpose of this great mutiny, which again Mr. Nehru propped up as the First Independence War, is actually perverted, because it was a very bloody, there was a lot of excesses from the Muslim side, a lot of massacres of English, and the purpose was put back on the throne the last Mughal emperor. And indeed, he was put back on the throne, but then the British defeated them, and he was exiled into Burma, where he died there. So we need to set the record straight, which I have done. And there are so many things now, archaeological discoveries, linguistic discoveries, genetic discoveries, the famous Aryan invasion, which has divided India even today. Even today, I shuttle very often from Delhi to Tamil Nadu, and I see in Tamil Nadu that still this, confrontation with the Hindi, confrontation with the Aryans, confrontation with the Brahmin, confrontation with the Vedas, it's all based on the fake theory that some white people came to India, from Western Ural or Russia, and then they imposed upon the tribals and the Dravidians, the original inhabitants of India, the Hindu religion, the Veda, the caste system. Entirely false. I mean, great sages like Swami Vivekananda, Shromido said it, but today there are proofs, linguistic proof, archaeological proof, genetic proof. Recently there have been genetic research which show that Indians have the same genome, they have the same genetic ancestry, all Indians. So, and yet the history of India today is still resting on this Aryan invasion that has divided India politically and genetically, and it saddens me to see that. So this book is, for me, the best book I have written, the history of India. I wrote it in French first, and so the French public is a different public, so I had to make it balanced, and then it was translated into English, and now it came out into English, and I feel that it's a very important book, not because I just use the archives that exist in India, the knowledge that is there in India, and wrote the book according to these facts. It's just a factual book.
How far back in history are you going to start, Francois?
Yeah, from the prehistoric time. I mean, it's a book from the prehistoric time till today, till Mr. Modi, till Article 370, because again, we see that misunderstanding and that prejudice that is attached to India is again, when the Article 370 was removed by Mr. Modi, it was very well misinterpreted in France and in the US. There was no proper fact given by the journalists. So it's very sad. So it goes from the prehistoric time till Article 370, till today.
That's great to know. Francois, I have always wondered, if you look at the Kyber Pass, which is how most of the invasions took place into India, at its narrowest point, it is just 16 kilometers, 1/6. Has it ever occurred to any Rajput king in there or that area that if they built a sturdy wall there, that they could prevent these guys from coming in? Has your research shown anything like that? Any even an attempt to do that? Because remember that the adjacent kingdom, the Chinese kingdom, had built a great wall which ran for thousands of miles.
Correct, correct. Yeah, yeah. Actually, I drove upon the Kyber Pass when I came from Paris the first time. We drove from Paris to Delhi. So I drove on the Kyber Pass, and of course, at that time I had no knowledge about Indian history. But yeah, it did enter my mind that it would have been actually. But the Chinese are very disciplined, and so they have that discipline, and that I don't think that any of the Maharajas and the Rajputs ever thought about it. I don't know. I have never come across any hint that some king, some emperor thought about building a wall to prevent invasion, which started very early. As you know, it started from the 7th century onwards. The invasions, and they all came through the Khyber Pass. I think the British were, that's why the British made their capital in Delhi. It made sense that that you defend the entrance of India, which was Delhi, of course, Punjab and Delhi. So that made sense. Today it doesn't make sense anymore. Every time I go to Delhi, I feel that it's the wrong capital for India. Of course, this is another matter.
Yes. Now, I think to add to your point, Bin Qasim was one of the few who tried navigating the sea to come to India. But then after that, there was a lull. I mean, the Indians fought back. Of course, he did establish a small kingdom, defeating Raja Dahir. The majority of the conquests have taken place through the Khyber Pass. So that's just an interesting thing, that at least you would think one king, one tribe, one entity would think, hey, if we dam this thing, there's nobody who can come across, and they could have saved themselves a lot of grief and heartburn afterwards. But be that as it may, we have to see what you have to see. Where did you get the research for people like Tarabai and Rani Chennamma and so on and so forth?
So my museum, we employ professors of Indian history. Tarabai, I have a professor in Udaipur, Professor K.S. Gupta, who's a specialist of that period. I've already done with him Maharana Pratap, and so he's directing that. And then we have a team of painters, and the professor of history gives a brief to the painter, and the painter does a black and white sketch. And once the historian approves, then he sends it to me, I approve, and a proper color painting, sign and date to it is done. So this is how we do most of our research. Some of them, like Tipu Sultan or, the Goa Inquisition, I went myself to Goa. I was very surprised to see that there is hardly anything left of the Goa Inquisition, though there's a BJP government there for 10 years. There is nothing in museum, there is no marks left of the places where people were crucified or tortured, so I'm very surprised that Indians do not seem to care about their past. They don't think that the past is important, whereas we in the West, we try to preserve the past. We think that the past is important to be preserved. Both it's true in the United States too, though it has a much shorter history than Europe. But you see that all the cowboy thing and the Indians, however folkloric it is, it's because the past is important to them. And in Europe, it's very important. The Celtic and civilization, very important to the French, and all the great warriors and poets, right from the, before Christ, are there. So, but in India, I don't think, that's why I have problem with my museum also. Lots of time people come to me and say, some of them say it, nicely, but why do you want to stir up the past? There is no need, let it lie. And some other come, aggressively saying, why you want to create communal disharmony? Why you're doing that? Are you an enemy of us? So there is that thing in India and we see that in terms of monuments that people do not care so much for monument, and you have the Archaeological Survey of India, which then puts barbed wire around the place, and then starts charging, foreigners to come for an entrance fee. So there is no. That's why there is no Museum of Indian History worth the name in India. I don't think there is a museum like mine. I mean, there might be some government museums which are very dusty, and very not nice. So we need to revive that in India, this thirst for the past. India has such a long and great past, much more glorious than Europe, much more ancient. I wrote a book on Ayurveda. This like 6,000-7,000 years before Christ. People had knowledge already about the body, about the mind. Such an ancient knowledge, and yet people in India are educated according to British standards, to Western standards. It's very sad today, even today, after so many years of the BJP government, nothing has been changed in the curriculum. Nothing has been changed. And as a result, people are not rooted in their history. They're not proud to be Indians. This is why so many intellectuals in India are anti-Hindu, anti-Indian, because they have no roots in their own glory. They have no pride of being Indian. So they ran down India, through the eye of a Western prism.
Francois, I might request you to help me if in the near future one of the so-called Indian Americans who are now elected to office in the United States, some are congressmen, congresswomen, and they think nothing about running down their own past. And I would like you to come and talk to them and have a debate of sorts where they can give all this nonsense that they spew. And it's always like, I'm an Indian American, so all Indian Americans should vote for me. That is one group. Having said that, then they'll go and pander to the other groups and then say that these guys are Hindutva, this is that. They'll just go on Modi bashing. I think this is one of the reasons why Modi said, okay, I'm not going to worry about this. I'm going to first make sure that India develops. I mean, the guy has only so many hours in a day. I'm not making any apologies for him. There are still lots of challenges. I'm just saying that in general, the history of India seems to be not of that importance to Indians, and I completely agree with you on that. I have toured India extensively as a child. My dad used to love to go to places. In fact, most of it was very difficult transportation. We used buses, trains, traveled in unreserved train compartments. It wasn't easy. But there was always this feeling that we need to go look at our temples, look at our culture and things like that. I might be an exception, but the rule is that, let me sit in front of my couch and see what is there on TV. And the other interesting thing I've noticed, Indians love to talk about the politics of other countries, whereas they don't seem to realize what is going on in their own country. Francois, I'm sorry, we are off on a slight bit of a tangent. I want to get back to our book. The book is now in paperback or hardbound form. Can you give us a little bit of details about two things, where you can get the book, and also people are asking me where they can donate to your cause?
So two things. The book is available, I think, on Garuda Books, garudabooks.com. Garuda is the publisher. I think it's Seattle-based also and Delhi-based. So it's Garuda, like Garuda, the bird.
Yes, it's Srikant Sanu's. Yeah.
Yeah, garudabooks.com, right.
Sankrant Sanu, right, yeah.
So that book is available. I think it's available also on Amazon, but the publisher seems to privilege people buying it on their own website. So it's garudabooks.com. They're reprinting the book now, so it must be doing fairly well. The museum, of course, people can donate in the U.S. We have a sister company in the U.S., which is a trust, which has got the 501c tax exemption. And then we have Fact India, which is also, we've got the ATG exemption. The best if people send me a mail, Francois Gautier 26 @gmail.com. Then I will guide them how to donate the museum. I really need money at the moment because I have started so many exhibitions. And of course, there's a recession in the world. So people used to give, they have to look after their own family. So we are very, very short of funds at the moment. So FrancoisGautier26.com. Maybe you can print.
Yes, I'll put that thing. I'll put that thing in the show more data of YouTube. Yeah. Yes. I will do that. I will do that.
I read them.
So, Francois, I wish you all the best in your endeavor. I have a few questions from our readers. If you don't mind, can I ask you the questions?
Sure.
Yeah. So here's a couple of questions. So we have answered the donations part. Okay. So here is one question. Amrita Shirali wants to know, why don't you speak to the children directly in schools, Monsieur?
No, again, education is the biggest problem. What you said about Indians in America. Once I gave a lecture in Atlanta University. I think there were 2,000 on rewriting Indian history. There were 2,000, at least 2,000 Indian students in that university in Atlanta. Nine came to my lecture. So unless India, the Indian government, Mr. Modi changes the curriculum in schools and teaches Indian children very early about their heroes, their heroines, the traumas, the genocide, but the greatness of Indian culture. Kalidasa, all the great poets. Like me as a Frenchman, I'm taught very early about my poets, my warriors, my heroine Jeanne d'Arc. So unless the Indian government does this, nothing is going to change. And the more Mr. Modi waits, the more there's going to be resistance. I remember when Murli Manohar Joshi tried to implement the chanting of Vande Mataram, the outcry that happened, that was 20 years ago. Imagine today, how much resistance there's going to be. But unless the Indian government changes what children are taught, from kindergarten onwards, nothing is going to change. Nothing is going to change. Mr. Modi can do whatever he likes. India may improve economically, but unless you make Indians proud to be Indians, any Indian, whether he's a Muslim, whether he's a Christian, whether he's a Hindu, proud to be an Indian, like the Chinese have made Chinese be proud to be Chinese. China is doing so well because Chinese are proud to be Chinese, even if it goes overboard. So that's the only solution. My books and my museum is a drop in the ocean. I'm doing it because it's my seva, because I have a gratitude towards India. But this is not going to change anything. Only the government can change it, and it's got to have the willpower. I have seen 3 HRD ministers, 3 education ministers. Now they are called education minister. None of them has implemented anything of value that is going to transform the education in India, the curriculums. Unless you teach Sri Aurobindo, at least in the universities, in philosophy classes, one of the greatest ever, contemporary philosophers in India, instead of teaching Nietzsche or Hegel or all these people who are not relevant to India. Unless you do that, nothing is going to change. So I'm doing my bit, but only Mr. Modi can do it, and he doesn't seem to, he seems to hesitate about doing it.
Yes, and I think I agree with you on this topic. So let's go on to the next question. Saurabh Vyas wants to know, sir, many of the Marxist historians describe the Vedic culture different from the Indus Saraswati civilization. What's your take on that?
No, so again, there are discoveries. I mean, there are many, many discoveries now that the Saraswati predates the Indus. And as your reader said, as your viewer said, now it is called the Saraswati Hindu civilization. That is the correct name, Saraswati Hindu civilization. So the Vedas predate, of course, the Saraswati, because the Saraswati is mentioned in the Vedas. It's only a question of dates. The British had put the Vedas 1,500 years before Christ. Now we push it back to 6,000, 7,000, 8,000 years before Christ. So it's a question of dates. But definitely the Vedic predates the Saraswati. The Saraswati predates the Indus civilization. So this is the correct order, and in my book I have put it correctly.
That's wonderful to know, Francois, and that brings us an end to all our questions. And I wish you all the best, my friend, and I will be sure to put your email address in the show more data for this video. It's actually going live right now. Viewers, please help Francois' effort. This is my third, I think, hangout with him, and I wish I did more, but it just so happens that, we have to have a reason. And Francois, again, I hope to have you back here. I really think that under the next democratic regime, there's going to be a lot of pressure on Modi from the United States. They're all vested interests, So anyway, so we are going to be ready for that, and I hope to have you back very soon. Once again, all the best for your book. Thank you very much, and namaskar.
Namaskar.